Hello, my name is Diego. This is the first of a series of videos about how to conduct a systematic review. In this first episode, I'm going to discuss some basic concepts related to this kind of reviews, and I am also explaining an overview of how these articles are done. In these videos, I'm going to focus on systematic reviews for interventions and systematic reviews that uses in randomized controlled trials as the main source of data. So maybe in other videos I'm going to explore other types of systematic reviews or other sources of data. So these are the contents of this video. So let's start with the definition. What is a systematic review? A systematic review is a type of scientific article. It's a review because it's a synthesis of the evidence, and it's also systematic. And this feature is very important because by being systematic, it has robust methods that can be replied by other people and are used to identify, interpret, assess, and report research on a certain topic. In fact, is to answer a specific question. Because one key difference between systematic reviews and reviews or narrative reviews is that systematic reviews answer a specific research question. So reviews or narrative reviews, that is the same, it's more like a chapter of a book. It's only like they talk about a certain topic, but in systematic reviews you start with a specific question and you conduct all this review to answer this specific question. Maybe you have seen this evidence-based medicine pyramid, and that puts systematic reviews at the top of the pyramids. Probably this pyramid is like a simplification of the evidence, but it's important to note that systematic reviews are considered a good source of evidence. But in fact, systematic review doesn't add like extra evidence. They only work with the evidence that already exists. So, for example, in a certain topic, there are not randomized controlled trials. Maybe the systematic review will provide conclusions that are not as strong as another systematic review that includes randomized controlled trials of other topic. And what are the key features that define systematic reviews? Well, first is that you have a predetermined eligibility criteria. In fact, you have a predetermined protocol before conducting the systematic review. Ideally, you first publish the protocol and then you start the review. And that's because you want to avoid to only report the positive results after you have done the analysis. So by first reporting the protocol, then you have to adhere as much as you can to that protocol. So the idea of systematic reviews is that with this process of the systematization, you decrease the probability of bias, and you also decrease the personal opinions or the personal preference of certain journals, or these kind of things that can influence the results of the analysis. And that's the reason why these reviews exist. Yes, another key feature of systematic reviews is that you have well-defined objectives. That's because I said that you start with a specific research question or a specific review questions. So with that you will have a specific objective, because the objective is to answer these questions, and it's like another way of expressing the research question. Also, as I said, the systematic reviews are systematic, so you do a systematic search of the literature, and by being systematic you allow the results to be transparent and that the results can be replied by another people. So being transparent and reproducible is an important feature, I think, for any kind of research. So that's an advantage of systematic reviews. In systematic reviews, you also have this critical assessment of the quality of included studies, because yes, with systematic reviews is a summary of the evidence, but you have to also provide the quality of the evidence, because you can end up with strong association but low quality studies. Another key feature of systematic review is that you have organized synthesis and clear presentation of findings, and this is very important because you save readers the time and expertise needed to locate all of the original articles. So they don't need to read all the articles about a certain area, they just need to read your systematic review. Okay, now I am going to talk about the steps in the process of a systematic review. Well, these are the basic steps. Probably the systematic review is more complex than this, but first you start by defining the review question. The review question is like the start of everything, and for that reason the review questions, I'm going to talk more about the review question or the research question in the next video. And then with that you plan the logistics. The logistics is the team, the time, the expertise, and these kind of things that need to be considered. Then you write the protocol. And publish it before starting the systematic review. I have already explained why it's important to first publish the protocol and then conduct the systematic review. Then you write the systematic review, and finally you publish your review. But what exactly is included when you conduct the systematic review? Well, the methods that are used for when you do a systematic review, first you start by searching the studies that you are interested in, and for that it is important to have a well-defined review question, because with a well-defined review question you have a specific eligibility criteria, and with that you can know better which studies are you interested in. So you plan the search, you select the studies that you are interested in, then you collect the data and analyze this data. And you can also do other kind of analysis like subgroup analysis or sensitivity analysis. And if the data is numeric, you can also do meta-analysis. But it is also important to assess the risk of bias, because you also want to report if the current evidence have a high quality. So it's important to assess the risk of bias for each study. And then another concept that is also important is the risk for the reporting bias, that is like the publication bias. Publication bias is some specific bias that occurs. Well, I think that I'm going to explain that in another video, but it's something that needs to be considered when you do a systematic review. Then also you assess for the certainty of evidence, and finally you summarize these findings and present as the results. So these methods are first described in the protocol. Then when you conduct a systematic review, you follow these methods as much as you can. And then you write a systematic review. When you write a systematic review, you present the methods as well as the results and the discussion. So this is another way to describe this process. You start with the review question. The review question includes things like which population I am interested in, things like the intervention, the comparison, as well as the outcomes. So the eligibility criteria is basically the population, the intervention, as well as the studies that need to be included. So the review question is basically the eligibility criteria plus the objective, plus the outcome, sorry. And the objective is another way of expressing the review question. So these things depends on the review question. So with this you can write the protocol. The protocol includes things like the background, the objectives, and the methods. And the protocol is a document that is published before starting the systematic review. So you publish the protocol, then you do the systematic review, and finally you write the systematic review article. In this article you also include the background that was previously described in the protocol. You also include the objectives, you also include all the methods that you have done in the protocol. And in the final article, you obviously you also include the results and the discussion, as well as the conclusion. Finally, I'm going to talk about the logistics. Well, I know that the logistics is not the first step of the systematic review, but I want to firstly talk about the logistics because there are some basic concepts here that are important. And the review question, I think that is something that I'm going to talk about in another video because it's extremely important. So, when you do a systematic review, it's very important to work in teams. And this is very important because in a lot of parts of the systematic review, you need to work with at least 2 people or 3 people. Because, for example, when you include studies, 2 people or more than 2 people have to select which studies need to be included, and they have to do it independently. And then, after that, they discuss which articles are not in common. For example, let's say that author A thinks that certain articles need to be included, but author B says that this same article doesn't need to be included. So yes, it's important to have these kind of discussions that are only do in teams, and it's very important because and it's better if the team contains people that are experts in different areas. So because people have different opinions and different backgrounds depending on his expertise, and this will help you to end up with a very objective systematic review. So the team is very important when you plan the systematic review. And the time is also something that needs to be considered because, for example, the Cochrane systematic reviews usually takes around 30 months to finish a systematic review, and it's also important to have like deadlines and a chart of tasks for each authors to control or to improve the work and decrease the amount of time. Then the expertise is also important because you need people experts in doing these complex statistical analysis, and maybe you will need people that can search for studies. So having experts is an advantage. And the other things of the logistics is the access to literature and software. Well, access of literature means not only access to, for example, Medline, Scopus, Web of Science. It also means to have full text articles, especially for the articles that you have to or you want to include. The software is something very interesting because right now there are a lot of different kind of softwares for different processes in the systematic review, and there are some softwares that you need to pay, but you can also find open access free softwares that can do amazing things. And I think that software is something that can decrease a lot of, that can save you a lot of time. Yes, that's the video, and thank you for your attention.